The madness using colons and semicolons. Hello, everybody. So we just completed reading an excerpt from the story Alice in Wonderland. And as we read through, we noticed there was a lot of use of colons and semicolons. So I want to give you a brief rundown of the rules of using semicolons and colons so you feel more comfortable using them in your own writing. Being able to use colons and semicolons is important because it will help you develop your own style. It will help you organize your thoughts a lot better, and it will also help with creating voice in your writing. Today we are going to focus on semicolons only and then save colons for another lesson to come. So here we are, semicolons. Here are the 3 rules that you need to know when using semicolons. Number 1, semicolons are used to join 2 independent clauses that are closely related in content or theme. Number 2, semicolons are used to separate main clauses joined by a conjunctive adverb. And number 3, semicolons are used to separate items in a list that already uses commas. I'm going to explain these more in depth in the following slides. So before we get into the first rule of semicolon use, we should review what is an independent clause. Take a moment and think to yourself, do you remember what an independent clause is? If you said a complete sentence, you were right. A complete sentence always has to have a subject and a verb. Here we go. Here's an example of a complete sentence or an independent clause. The Mad Hatter prefers tea over coffee. The Mad Hatter is our subject, and prefers is what he does, the verb. So let's take a look here. This is an example of how we can use a semicolon to join 2 independent clauses. The first rule is that we have to join 2 independent clauses that are closely related in theme. So our first sentence, the Mad Hatter prefers tea, semicolon. He wouldn't be caught dead drinking coffee. As you can see, we have one independent clause and then another at the other end of the semicolon. The first sentence has to do with what the Mad Hatter likes to drink. The second sentence has to do with what he doesn't like to drink. So we're still on the theme of the Mad Hatter's drinking preferences. So now that we reviewed the first rule of semicolon use, let's move on to the second. Semicolons are used to separate main clauses joined by a conjunctive adverb. So what exactly is a conjunctive adverb? A conjunctive adverb is a word that connects or brings together 2 complete thoughts. It provides smooth transition from one idea to another, and it's usually always followed by a comma. Let's take a look at a list of some conjunctive adverbs. Some of them may be familiar to you. However is one that is used quite often. You've probably used this in your writing before. After you familiarize yourself with this list of conjunctive adverbs, you can really start to understand how a semicolon and this word together can take 2 separate thoughts and make them flow together. So let's use however. I could say, I really like the color blue. However, green is my favorite color. Let's go back to our Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter prefers tea. We know that from our first independent clause. We can add the semicolon and however to expand that thought. The Mad Hatter prefers tea. However, he'll drink coffee when the mood strikes. Okay, we're making progress. We already reviewed the first 2 rules of semicolon use. Let's move on to the last one. Semicolons are used to separate items in a list that already use commas. So let's take a look at this sentence so we can further understand what that rule means. I'm going to read it to you. I vacation in Sydney, Australia, Tokyo, Japan, Paris, France, and Venice, Italy. That doesn't sound right, does it? Take a moment to see if you can figure out why. Do you think you figured it out? Let's take a look at the first two items in this list. Sydney, Australia. So if you know your geography, Sydney is a city and Australia is the country that it's in. The same goes for Tokyo in Japan, and Paris in France. Whenever we have items like this that are joined by a comma, but they mean one thing, it can be confusing. I read it as Sydney, Australia, Tokyo, Japan, Paris, France. I'm going to show you how semicolons can be used to make this sentence flow the way that it should. So instead of having a very long sentence with a bunch of commas in it, we would use semicolons to group together the city and the country. I vacationed in Sydney, Australia, semicolon, Tokyo, Japan, semicolon, Paris, France, semicolon, and Venice, Italy. I have vacationed in Sydney, Australia, Tokyo, Japan, Paris, France, and Venice, Italy. Do you see how the semicolon creates a little bit of a longer pause in between each item, and it helps keep the two, city and country, together in the sentence without the whole sentence running together? So that's it. We've made it through the 3 rules of when we can use semicolons in our writing. As a review, semicolons are used to join two independent clauses closely related in content or theme. They are also used to separate main clauses joined by a conjunctive adverb, or words like however, indeed, accordingly. And then lastly, semicolons are used to separate items in a list that already uses commas. We saw that with our sentence where we were listing cities and countries, and we use semicolons to create a longer pause to keep those two items together so they could be identified as one item in the list. I hope you're more comfortable using semicolons in your writing. I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice using semicolons by creating your own sentences in the assignment to come.